Okay, moms and dads, buckle up because we are going on a journey tonight. I need everybody to be paying attention. If you are a mom, go find dad. If you're dad, go find mom, because I am freaking out right now. And I stumbled upon something that's super weird. And I'm hoping that somebody on the internet can debunk me. I tried to verify this. I tried to be debunked over the last hour. I went to my husband. I went out to Savannah. I'm like, am I going crazy? Am I looking at this correctly? And I've decided now that I definitely know what I'm looking at, and everyone agrees. And I'm hopeful that someone can debunk this, because this is some super advanced, weird stuff. By the way, I'm going to include links. So give me a second as I speak. I'm going to talk, and then I'm going to stop and put in links so you guys can follow along, because I'm genuinely just in need of somebody to debunk this, because I feel like I'm in 1984 and we're watching information and facts and history be updated and edited in real time. Okay, so just a little background about how we got here. So I had Dr. Robert Malone, he is the maker of the mRNA vaccines, who has now been censored off of Twitter, but everyone has seen his Joe Rogan interview, and now they want Joe Rogan censored because of it, where he just presented data and facts. He's a total self-described science nerd, super obviously pro-vax. He created vaccines throughout his entire career, and he just kind of wanted to tell the truth about what he was seeing, really weird irregularities in data, yada, yada, yada. It was an amazing conversation. Actually sat with him for 4 hours because I was so engaged. So he's obviously an expert in talking about the COVID stuff. And then I started talking to him about how I don't believe this is the first time this has happened. And I start introducing to him all of these facts that I've been sharing with you guys on Instagram. Now, keep in mind, he's 62 years old. He's not following Candace's Instagram stories. And he starts talking about this recognition and how shocking it is for him as a career professional, spent his entire life doing this, to realize that there's manipulation, there's data manipulation, there's fact manipulation. And I basically start taking him through the stories that I've been sharing with you for the last year. And I was kind of playing a game with him and reading him hey, like I did with you guys the last couple of days. Hey, how many cases of tetanus do you think there were during the peak of tetanus? And he would make a guess, and he would be so over. And I was like, nope, 550. So we did this in the middle of the show, and we were going to share this later. Again, to make it super clear, I was getting these numbers of the peak amount of cases in the United States and the peak amount of deaths for all of these various diseases that our children are required to get vaccinated for in order to go to school, from the American Medical Association. So they are part of the big pharma syndicate, in my opinion. And this report was from 2007, and it was done actually promoting vaccination. So this report was done saying, hey, vaccines have been successful. Look at how successful it's been. But then my eyes were drawn to the fact that it was people weren't dying from these diseases. I'm like, wow, 17 people out of 200 million, or 500 people out of 200 million, not even clear that these are children. It's probably not children. So I was reading that report to him. I'm linking the report here, shot of that report on the next slide. So you can fact check me on this. American Medical Association, very easy chart to read, from 2007. So I get home and I'm thinking about this amazing 4-hour discussion that I've had with Dr. Robert Malone. And it occurs to me also that another piece of this that bothers me is just the fact that, so much is rushed when children are so young. And I start wondering, half of these diseases, when do kids even get this? What is the average age that you even get mumps, measles, rubella? I mean, I remember the chicken pox, so I definitely wasn't an infant when I got it. So why is an infant forced to get this shot? So I start compiling this research, this element of what is the average age. And for chicken pox, I find out it's from the ages of 9 and 11. And then I look up rubella. And to my surprise, the CDC website pops up, and this is what comes up, which I thought, this is weird. $12.5 million people across 2 years, 1964 and 1965. That's totally different than the chart that the American Medical Association is reporting. I mean, how 12.5 million people and 2,500 people lost their newborns? mean, this would mean I was very wrong. I was wrong when I was telling you guys and taking you through this. This would mean I was wrong when I was talking to Dr. Robert Malone. I'm freaking out. I'm going, oh my God, what did I mess up here? This is crazy. Where are they getting this number from? 12.5 million people, and I'm having a heart attack that I have to, correct and say to people, I'm sorry. I don't know how I possibly got this number, because what I looked at said that there was only 24 deaths and that the average was 17 deaths per year, and then there was 24 deaths. But this clearly says 2,500 newborns died, right? Right? Oh no, wrong. And this is when things are going to start to get really interesting. So I go back to that Journal of American Medical Association's report, and I look at the data again, and I'm super sure that I'm reading it correctly. And then I say, okay, wait a second, I'm reading a journal. Like, journals have to have footnotes. You have to be able to know where they're pulling their data from. That's the whole point. This is why they are the tippity top tier of information. They are the experts. Of course, there's going to be something at the end with footnotes that tells me exactly where they pulled this data from, so I can confirm that I was either right or wrong. And sure enough, I go down and very clearly organized are all of these footnotes. And the footnotes have links that you can hit and you can follow to see where they pulled the data from. Except strangely, when I hit the link that's for rubella, there isn't one. Take a look. So I start panicking a little bit. I'm thinking, how am I going to find the CDC surveillance report from 1969? I mean, I'm looking all over the CDC website. I'm trying to go backwards. And then it occurs to me, you know what? Why don't I copy and paste that exact phrase that is in the footnotes and see if something comes up as a hit when I do a general search? And by golly, it did. I stumbled across this old report from the CDC, which exists in some archive of their websites. And it is, I'm holding it in my hand because I printed it out because I didn't want it to disappear. And it's the Center for Disease Control Rubella Surveillance. This report is stamped from 1972. And it's very obvious from where it exists that this was sort of scanned in after the fact. So this report was done before the surveillance was just happening online. So, I mean, you can imagine, I get this report, I'm scrolling, my hands are shaking. I don't know if I'm reporting fake news. I don't know what's going on. And here is what the report states. Link to that report below, which brings us to the question. This is the CDC versus the CDC. How does the CDC's report from the surveillance all the way up until 1972 match what the American Medicine Association says? But today on the CDC website, it claims that there were 12.5 million cases during this year. I mean, that's a huge discrepancy. We're not talking about a little bit. And these are just cases, by the way. They kind of stay away from deaths. They are not talking about 3,200 newborns that are being dead. Where on earth did the CDC get these numbers from? What are we even how did we get to 12.5 million? The CDC clearly has some explaining to do. So I bring this to my husband and I'm like, debunk me. I need you to be the CDC. I need you to be the CDC versus the CDC debunking me. I was like, look at these numbers, look at the report, read it. Am I missing something? Is it somewhere at the bottom? Does it say times it by 10,000, times it by a million? He looks at this report and he points to some things that are interesting. He says, well, first off, this report shows that in those 2 years, not every state reported the numbers. Like 36 states reported the numbers. And there's a key that says, no cases were reported from that state. And so I wanted to investigate that because, for example, even though it's 36 states, and even if you doubled the number, you wouldn't get anywhere near 12.5 million. You wouldn't even get to 1 million. But he did note that California hadn't reported, and California is the biggest state. And so I wanted to look into that. Why wasn't California reporting rubella numbers for the years 1964 to 1965? Can I find these numbers somewhere else? My thinking here was, let me go with the biggest state. Let me find California. If California has numbers that we can input into here, then we can get a bigger picture. Like maybe somewhere hidden California had 11 million cases. Like maybe that was the hub of the outbreak. And I find another journal, which was specifically geared towards California and rubella. And here it is. So there it is. So California had 13,000 cases plausibly after this journal did a deep dive going backwards. But these people self-reported, whatever that means. So maybe I don't know, maybe there was some sort of a VAERS type system back then. But in the state of California, rubella was not reportable until 1966. And this makes sense because think about this. Rubella was a very less virulent version of measles, right? It was the German measles. And what was going on in the United States was measles, which was way more virulent. And even if you look at that report originally from the American Medical Association, not even measles had anywhere near, in its peak years, millions of cases. So where did the CDC, which this is a current, if you can find this only on CDC website right now, where did they get this information that there were 12.5 million cases and 3,200 newborns died? That is not present in their own reports. So yeah, this is a case of the CDC versus the CDC. I can find this information nowhere else other than sites which are citing the CDC's new updated information. And this is so fascinating to me because also amongst this 4-hour discussion with Dr. Robert Malone on my podcast, we were talking about this sort of disappearance of information. Like when they control the narrative, they can just keep moving the goalposts and make things crazier than they were, right? So the truth, according to them back then, was that there weren't that many cases. There certainly weren't that many deaths, 24 deaths. And amongst a population of about 200 million people, you're talking about at its max, 100,842 cases that were reported in 65 and 448,000 cases that were reported in 1964. So it's just interesting that has now transformed into 12.5 million cases. What the CDC is relying upon, and this is something that me and Dr. Malone also discussed, is that people don't dig deep for information. So taking you on this journey is to show you, right? So any normal parent would just look up rubella, find the current CDC website, and instantly believe that they knew the information and that at some point in America, there were 12.5 million cases one year. It is just not true according to the CDC's own documents, which I much more believe considering they were so difficult to find. And as you can see, as I said, they were scanned in. So this is like paperwork. You know, you can't just delete the data and write something else like they can do on these websites now and just update definitions on the websites. So I am throwing down that gauntlet challenge for any person to make this make sense. You have all the links yourself. Let me know what is going on at the CDC. We are just seeing too much data disappear, too much data change, too much data be manipulated. This freaked me out. I think all the young kids are saying, I'm shook. Bro, me and you right now? Yeah, you and me both. To be fair, the CDC was probably assuming that nobody would be crazy enough to fact check them all the way back to their 1970 documents. But I had time.